Hi, I'm Joshua Finn with J&H Aerospace. Today we're going to build the Redshift, not this one, the real one, the Redshift 2. So you'll see some major differences between this and what you're going to end up with. You're building an airplane with swept wings. It's capable of accommodating an electric power system and so on, and a 24mm black powder rocket motor. So before we get started, a couple words of warning and whatnot. This is a well-tested airframe design. All of that is dealt with. However, this is not a beginner's airplane. This is an extremely fast airplane, and it's as stable as we can make it. But you still need to understand that you're putting 5 pounds of thrust on an airplane that's got about a 20-inch wingspan. So please bear that in mind before you attempt to fly this airplane. If in doubt, get somebody experienced to help you with the flying. The next item is we need to talk about your power system. So you need to have some sort of motor. This is an Emax 1306 red bottom. This one's a 4000 kV. Pretty hot quadcopter setup. That will work on. This will make your airplane fly well on anything from 2S all the way up to 4S. You'll need some sort of very small, low-profile receiver. Personally, I recommend the FreeSky, the little micro 4-channel receivers for them that are coming out of China. They're not actually made by FreeSky. They're about half the size of this. This is a 6-channel Lemon unit. You need about a 10 amp ESC. You really don't need anything bigger than that because you're not going to sustain 10 amps for any kind of extended period of time. This is a cheap Hobby King one. Just make sure you've got a BEC that can take what you're doing. This one actually is rated for only up to 3S, so you'll need to find one of the I think it's the Simon K ESCs that are rated for 4S. If you don't have them, the little, I think these are 1.5 or so millimeter bullets. Propellers, the recommended maximum performance propeller for this thing is a 3-blade 3x5. I think Gemfan is the primary source for that. This is a Gemfan 4x4.5 2-blade prop. That'll give you a very nice, well-rounded setup, very strong climb performance, fairly quiet, fairly low current draw. You need 3 micro servos, something under 4 grams. These look kind of ratty because they're taken out of other airplanes of mine. We're going to use these Turnigy servos on the ailerons. Personally, I do not recommend you use those. I recommend you use something that's got a little tighter gear train. The little Blue Arrow, I think they're about 3 gram servos. Those are ideal for that. But that's what I have on hand right now. So, with all of that taken care of, let's go through what's in your kit, what you need to make sure you have. So you have a 24mm body tube, piece of lead weight. Probably when you get your kit, it'll be a bigger piece than that. You're going to have a piece of spider wire in here, and this is you don't get an elevator push rod. You get a piece of pull string. And in keeping with that is you're going to pull out this piece of 10,000th piano wire, and that's what you're going to make your elevator spring out of. So you have drawings and diagrams and whatnot pertaining to the aircraft. In the event that anything is broken, just set those to the side. So you're going to have a 1/32 inch plywood part, and that's got your firewall, control horns, and so on, and the mounts for your removable rocket tube. And I did very good laser cutting on that, it appears. So you've got a piece of 3/32 balsa that's your tail surface, the front of your elevator, and your dihedral gauge. Another piece of 3/32 balsa, which is the rest of your elevator, and also some inserts for the removable firewall. And you'll understand later what that's all about. A piece of 1/4 inch balsa, which is the trailing edges of your wing, and that'll also contain your aileron area. Some 1/32 plywood, which is your inner fuselage sides. A piece of 3/32 balsa, which is the outer fuselage sides. You'll have 2 of these wing panels from 1/4 inch balsa. And then you'll have another piece of 1/4 inch balsa, which is your fuselage core section. Lots of very small parts. Be careful to keep all of those parts together in order, because it gets very confusing if they get separated. This is a piece of ultra coat, which you'll use, or monocoat. I don't remember which that is. It doesn't matter. The point is that's for your hinges. You got a 1/4 inch carbon fiber tube, which is going to serve as your tail boom. And you'll have 2 piano wire push rods for your ailerons. And this is a tube marking guide, which you're going to use for lining up everything on your engine pod. So let me get everything cleared away and we'll get started with the build. We're going to start by building out our fuselage sides. So you've got your 3/32 balsa and you've got your 1/32 inch plywood. So what we're going to do is we're going to break these out of here. And you'll notice there are some key little holes and portholes and whatnot in these. So the holes are going to be for mounting areas on this aircraft, and the little porthole, the oval-looking things back here, are exits for your aileron push rods. And they're nice and long so that you can accommodate several different setups for your aileron servos, from doing side-by-side to front and back and what have you. That just gives you plenty of space. And now we'll go ahead and we'll crack the balsa ones out. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to lay these kind of opposite each other, because the plywood part goes on the inside, the balsa section goes on the outside. We want to make sure that we don't end up with 2 left sides or something. So, if I can get this to come out, hold on 1 second. There we go. The reason that we are assembling these first is we want to get our fuselage sides to be as nice and straight as possible. So we start out with a nice straight fuselage. So there's one. You want these to be, you want them to be glued fairly well, because they are going to take some fairly significant flight loads. We'll discuss later on the fact that you can also put some fiberglass on the outside of the fuselage to further beef it up, just in case you have a hard landing or something that could damage your airframe. So you want to make sure that you line up the various little mounting holes as best you can on this. And there we go. So we're going to flip these over and pick one or the other. Does not matter which one you start with, but we're going to build up our fuselage core on one of these. Now, as I said, there are a lot of little pieces on this. And you'll notice things are kind of in rows together. So we're going to start on the top one here. So it's the one that's kind of gapped apart from the others. and this one will help you to understand what all is going on. So what you want to do is go ahead and break all of this out and kind of leave it in there, because we're going to flip this thing over in a second. And the reason we're going to flip it over is so that we maintain orientation of all these little bitty pieces. Alright, so carefully going to rotate this around. I'm going to pop out this big long piece on the back. It looks like this. And that piece is going to go on the back. And if you notice, when I lay this down, you notice it sticks out some. The reason for that is that when you go in here and you sand everything down, that's going to allow you to have a real nice streamlined shape. So I'm going to glue that part in. You can line it up on the notch for the wing trailing edge up top. And so there's a notch that sits right here, and that notch you can kind of use as an alignment station. Now the next piece that comes out of here is one that's kind of got a little angle on the front of it. You're not going to glue that in. Do not glue that piece in, because that is going to become your battery hatch. And you have a hatch both on the top and the bottom. So we're going to pull out the next piece that's out in front. It's got two little mounting holes on it. And that piece we are going to glue in place. And we'll need to take a pause here in just a second. We're going to glue this in. We have an avian concert occurring over there. Alright, so that piece is glued in. Now if I slide that little part out, you'll see that it mounts in place real nice. And like I said, that's your battery hatch. Okay, we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so now we're going to continue with the top of this fuselage side. So we've got this part over here. You've got this piece that kind of curves around, and you notice it's broken into three pieces. We're going to cut out the curved part of that. If we leave this so that its top is facing us, then that will line everything up correctly on here. And break that piece out. And that one glues up on the front here. Before I glue it in place, you can see we've got a gap down here, and that's for routing wires and whatnot into the front of the airplane. So we're going to glue that in place, and we'll just use the outline of the fuselage to line it all up. Now the next piece is the top hatch, because we have two hatches in this airplane. And so we're going to just cut that out, and we're going to lay it down. We're not going to glue it in place. And then we'll break out that next piece. It's kind of a long, skinny piece. And it has a notch in it, which is for the leading edge of your wing. So you've got the little notch here, and it gets skinny towards the back. And I've got a little bit of gap on that access hatch, so that's okay. We can resolve that with some shims later. Okay, so the bottom line is, once you're done with that step, you end up with this pattern. Now, by now, hopefully you kind of are understanding the layout of this fuselage core. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to go to this bit that's in the middle, and you'll notice it's slightly different. So we're going to start with the bottom part, just like we did. So we're going to duplicate that again, but you notice it doesn't come up as far in the front, and it doesn't come up all the way in the back. And there's this little half arrow looking piece. And I'll explain as we do this what that is. So we're going to start with this front part. We'll cut it out. And one thing you can tell which part is the front part by taking this lower hatch piece out here, and there's another piece that is identical to it in this center section of your fuselage core. That'll come out of it. Oop. Well, that's one way to get it out. Alright, so it's got this little cutout in the front. And so we will just want to line that up with everything. And we'll explain what the gap is for in just a second here. Alright, so the purpose of the gap is you're going to have a piece that matches that. And that's going to be the mounting piece for your firewall or for your removable nose, since you can alternate between electric and rocket power. Alright, so we're going to take that other hatch piece out of there. I'm trying not to glue everything together. And so we're just going to glue our little hatch pieces together here, so that we now have it to half of our thickness here. So we can just set that back into place for now. And now we'll crack out the next piece. So it's curved around to the back. And it's going to go in the back here, and you'll notice it doesn't go all the way up to the top. I'll explain that in a second. Actually, I'll explain it now. That gap is going to be so that you can install your tail boom. So we've got a gap at the front, and the purpose of the gap at the front is for your firewall mounting bracket, and the back is to clear your tail boom. Okay, so at this point we've got our bottom done for this layer of the fuselage. We're trying not to glue our hatches in place. We're now going to proceed to the top, which is this little curved bit here. It should look familiar because it is in fact identical to the one that you just did for the first layer of the fuselage core. You'll also notice there are these semicircular pieces. Just leave those in there for now. Those are for forming your nose cone for when you're flying this as a rocket-powered glider. And the best way to not lose those is to just leave them in there for now. Alright. And we will glue our next layer on our top tongue-tied here, on our top hatch. We'll just lay that back in place as a placekeeper. Now, if you remember, I mentioned that piece that looks like a half of an arrow. Let me break that out of here so you can see this. This little piece right here. And where that goes is it goes right back here. So you line up the notch, and that's going to form a gap for your tail boom. Okay, so let me explain that one more time, and then we're going to drop away from that. So you've got all of that, you've got this gap right here, you've got another gap, a wider gap there, and then you've got the gap back here for your tail boom. Alright, so we're going to pause for a second. The reason we're pausing is so I can take a picture for you to have for reference in your instructions. Okay, so we're going to finish the last part of our stack up for a fuselage core, and by now this should be fairly familiar to you. What it's going to do is it's going to close up most of this gap at the front and the back. and thereby you'll have a tunnel through which your tail boom will mount, and basically it formed up the area for mounting the firewall or removable nose as well. And again, I'm just leaving those crescent-shaped pieces in place. We'll come back at a later time and we'll pick those up. Okay, and we'll go ahead and we'll put the last layer on our lower hatch here. One thing you find with laser cutting through thick balsa is sometimes there are some slight beveling to things, so you'll want to sand that to get the perfect layout for it. That's for those of you that really want your airplane to look nice. I figure that at 100 miles an hour I'm not going to care what it looks like. This is going to be a little reddish colored streak going across the sky. Okay. And there we go. And now, what you'll have is this shape. Sorry, my fingers have to hold those hatches in place, but you're going to have a gap across here. You're going to have a little hole at the front for your insert for your removable firewall nose cone, and then you'll have a hole at the back, and that's for your tail boom. So we're going to take a break real quick, and then we'll be right back. Okay, now let's take our remaining fuselage side. So we remember the plywood goes on the inside. That's going to lay down on here. Drop your removable hatches out of the way. Apparently I had some wet glue still in there. So we're just going to set those aside for a moment. And now we will attach this guy. You basically just want to line up the notches there at the top. That's the main thing. And so what we'll do is around all the area that's going to be in contact with it. Now, you're probably thinking, man, that's a boxy fuselage. Let me sand that thing off so it looks nice. Resist the urge to do that. We want to build out the front first. And the reason we want to build it out first is we're going to sand it and fare it in. Okay, so we've got our fuselage put together. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to put together the nose section of this aircraft. So what we're going to first do, we're going to pop out our firewall here. And you'll notice you've got two firewalls actually. The reason for that is we're going to put those together. You want to make sure, first of all, that little hole is out of the way. And clear out any of the rest of them. Now we can glue those together. So try not to get too much glue into the little bitty holes. It's probably not going to mess them up. But here they go together. You may have to ream these out a little bit anyway to accommodate whichever motor you put in here, because I've left you enough space for several different options, both the 1306 and the 1104, 1106 type motors. Now take this little tab out over here. Go ahead and take out two of those, and then over here on your stabilizer sheet, there'll be two more pieces, and just take a pair of those out. And now what we're going to do is, if you will notice, these line up, those little tabbed bits, the holes line up, the outline lines up, so you can see right here we've got the rounded edges. It fits together like so, so make sure that the holes line up, and then we're going to fasten these together. Try to verify that the holes are together there. Then you're going to put glue on that. You're going to add the second one. So now you build up a 3/32 inch core. Sorry, a 3/16 inch core, and then you'll lay the other one on top. So you'll see now you've got these tabs coming out on either side. Top and bottom, however you want to call it. Yeah, we'll be right back. Well, maybe not. Okay. Sorry about that interruption. Now, the way that this works is you'll see in your firewall, those little tabs fit in and a little tight. Now, the tabs are such that you want it to line up on the bottom here. So if I were to flip this around, it wouldn't line up with the bottom, you see. So we want to turn it around so that the bottom of this is all flush. Now there's a hole that's going to be covered up by that in your firewall, and that's okay. That's just to clear the shaft on your motor. Because as you know, a lot of those motors, the shaft sticks out the base plate a little bit. So now we have this whole arrangement, and we can in fact slide this into the front of our fuselage. A little bit of a tight fit. In fact, yep. And this one has actually left me with a little bit of a gap on the sides. That's okay. When you get yours, that will not be the case. You'll be able to fare everything in. So the main thing is, now what I'm going to do is, based on that, I'll come in and I'll sand everything in. And now is when I will profile this to get a really nice, pretty shape to this aircraft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to round all of this off based on that nose, and then we'll come back once I've got that done. So back in a bit. All right, so we've got this sanded out now. We've got these mounting holes right here. Those are for your rocket pod. Deal with those later. We have sanded this so it flush mounts in pretty well with our removable firewall. If I can get it back out. Hope it didn't glue itself in, but I think it partially has. Ah, there we go. That snaps out. Now, everything is faired in back here, so our tail boom, if you will, fits in like so. We'll talk about that more later. Main thing is, now, if you remember, we had more parts over here. So we're going to build up a second, if you will, firewall. If I can get it to come out of here. So we're going to cut these crescent-shaped pieces out of here. These are not going to be a total, exact, perfect fit. Probably what we will do is, when you get your kits, there will be a piece of 3/32 balsa that you can tack onto this as well, 2 pieces of it. And that will allow you to build this nose fairing out, nose cone I should say, to full thickness. But the bottom line is, these do have a kind of more curved on one side than the other. Try to line that up. It's not going to matter a whole lot because you're going to sand this thing all nice and round. And so what we're doing is we're just stacking these crescents on top of each other. And so now it's curved like so. I'll sand the back of it somewhat flat. And now we'll take 2 more of these pieces with little tabs on them. We're going to do the same build-up procedure as before. Boy, I'm not klutzy tonight. I'm breaking all the carrier sheets on these. And same arrangement as before, you line up the curves and the little mounting holes. Orient the little tab is the same. Now things are going to be done a little bit different this time, because this time we don't have a piece of plywood for this to latch into. Instead, we're going to go in here and we're going to just press these tabs in along the seams. Press it in like so. Snaps in. And we'll take it back out. Glue it in here. Now you've got that. And to avoid what happened just a minute ago, let me dip some accelerator in on this. Kicker, whatever you want to call it. We'll fit this into the nose. And now we're just going to lightly sand it in so that it matches the rest of the airplane. And now, have a fairly nice fit and finish, however you want to call it. And so we've got a nose that fits in place. If you have any concerns about it letting go, you can get some servo screws. Hopefully these will go in. I think I may have filled up the holes that they go into. There we go. And you can actually use a total of 4 of these. If you have long ones though, it'll be more than sufficient. So what you're doing is you're bonding into the little holes in here. And now that has your nose piece secured so that it's going to stay put. You can take those out and you can pop the nose off. And then you pop your firewall on instead. We're just going to set the firewall aside for the time being. And now we'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll work on the rocket pod and then the tail boom and the tail surfaces. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our body tube and we're going to take this body tube and from one end we're going to make a mark 2 3/4 inches from this end. And now I'm going to take this piece of paper, this marking guide, and I'm going to wrap it around here. And so this part, what we've got is it kind of wraps around here and this forms like a 45-degree plane. We want that part here, where it dips in, to line up with that. So now I'm going to mark all the way around here. Basically, I'm just tracing this outline. And then, on these diamond cutouts at the apex of each diamond going across, I'm going to mark. I'm doing that on both sides. So now I can take this off. And I'm going to take this sanding block here is fairly straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line my pen up with those diamond marks, and now I can make a mark the full length of this tube, like so. So now I've got a perfect parallel line all the way across. Now I come over to the other side and I do the exact same thing. So now I have 2 parallel lines that are exactly opposite each other on the tube. And now what I'm going to do is first I'm going to cut this diagonal. You need to make sure your razor blade is fairly sharp when you do this. Because you only get one chance to get this right. This diagonal shape is not critical, but what it does do is it helps to direct the exhaust gases away from the rocket, or from the fuselage of this aircraft, in the event that you are running engines that have an ejection delay on them. You can get, I think, D12P, something like that, plugged engines that don't have a delay or an ejection charge, and those are a much better option. This also does help streamline things a little bit. There, I've got that. Now, come over here to your plywood parts, and you've got these kind of swoopy looking pieces. I'm going to cut these out. The way this works is you've got the sharp point at the back. That's going to go towards the back, the blunt end of your tube. And so this is going to line up on that line. And what we want to do is have it basically tangent at that line. This particular glue joint is one of those places where you hear me say something to the effect of, don't try to save weight here. What that means is a very high stress location in this rocket. This transmits, you're going to transmit 5 pounds of peak thrust through this end of the rocket, or into your airplane. Rocket plane, something like that. And it is not wanting to cure, so I'll give it a little motivation. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the other side. We're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to kind of pre-hit this up with accelerator that way. I'll lay this one on. It bonds virtually instantly. There we go. And if you are planning on using those, whatever random Estes D engines you can get your hands on, I would highly recommend that you coat the inside of this tube with CA. And that way it will not burn out as easily from your exhaust gases. And now at this point, you've got this thing, it fits onto the top like so, and all you have to do is you take a couple of little servo screws and with those, I don't know if this screwdriver is going to let me screw those in. Well, anyway, you get the picture. You can screw those in place, and this gives you a very firm mounting for this that you're able to also disengage very easily, and you can fly this just as a pure electric model. As you put those screws on both sides, and you're good to go. We're going to take this pod back off for convenience sake. And now we'll go ahead and we'll get our tail boom out and go ahead and slide it in. Verify that it all lines up. But we're not going to mount it in place yet. Because what we're going to do next is we're going to mount our tail put together our tail surfaces, and then we will mount those to the boom, and then we'll install the boom into the airplane. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our tail surfaces here. Let's start with the elevator. And there's this triangular little piece down here on the other sheet. That is the leading edge of your elevator. So we'll give that a quick light sanding. Line that up, mount it in place. And I would recommend rounding these tail surfaces off pretty good. Use your judgment as to how super streamlined you want them to be. And then we'll take our rudder here, and we'll do the same thing with it. And we'll be back in a minute when I'm done sanding the rudder off. Alright, so the next thing, now we've got these tail surfaces sanded, and I did miss a little spot here, and I want it to look nice because I do. Find your razor blade, and go ahead and cut your elevator loose. And now we'll use our razor plane here. We'll bevel that off at about a 45-degree angle. We'll come back to the elevator, do the same thing. And then we'll give that a quick sanding here. And now we're going to lay this down so the beveled sides on both of these are facing down. And we're going to get our heat activated covering material here. And we're going to cut off a strip that is about a ½ inch wide. Now, those of you who like to use Blenderm tape for hinges, I'm going to caution you that the Blenderm may work, but you will want to cover the center section of this stabilizer with aluminum foil or something. Reason being, I don't think Blenderm can handle the temperatures that you get from a 24mm engine. If you're launching on C engines or something like that, you're probably okay. But this thing is powered by D's, and so I would exercise extreme caution. Alright, so I've laid this on adhesive side down. And I'm going to grab my covering iron. make sure that this doesn't tend to bind up on itself at all. Now, what I am going to recommend, this may seem alarming to you, I am going to come back and I am going to squirt CA in here. Probably the best material to squirt into this joint would be like foam tack or Yoo-Hoo Heart. In the absence of that, CA will work just to help ensure that material gets bound in there real good. Because you do not want this joint, this hinge, to come up on you. You may have to come back and lightly whack that with some sandpaper, and there we go. The other thing I'm going to do is on the leading edge of this, I'm going to also, and I will show y'all, I just rub my finger across this, but if you don't want CA all over your hand, take a piece of balsa and just rub that in. And the entire purpose of that is to keep the heat of the engine from peeling up the front of that hinge. Okay, it's got a little bit of double centering on that, but that should be okay. Now what we're going to do is, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this 10,000 piano wire, and I'm going to take a piece where I've got about a half of an inch sticking out. I'm going to bend that over at a 90-degree angle, and then I'm going to measure 2 inches here. I'm going to bend another piece in here exactly the same across, so it's just kind of a 3/4 of a rectangle. And since I forgot my wire cutters, there we go. Alright, so we're going to make one of those, and then we're going to make another one that's exactly the same. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my elevator here. I'm going to bend the elevator over here, and I'm going to take one of these, so I've got it so that the bends are facing this way. I'm going to take this top section, and just this side of the little slot for my control horn for my elevator, I'm going to stick this into the face right here, this face of the elevator. I'm going to press it through. And I don't want it to come through the top or bottom of the elevator. I want it to stay entirely inside it. And I'm going to pull it back out part of the way, and you'll see why I'm going to do that. So I've got it out part way, so I can then line up the other end. And the other end I'm pressing into the stabilizer, not the elevator. So these two ends that we're pressing in, one is going into the elevator and one is going into the stabilizer. And this is what is known as a spring string setup. So this is a spring-loaded elevator. So you can see now it tends to spring up like that. That's not enough force. And as such, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm pressing this one in on this side of the elevator control horn. I'm just sticking this guy in here. Pull it back out part way, so I can line up on the stabilizer. And now it's in. And now I have enough elevator control that I'm fairly confident that at 100 odd miles an hour this will spring up enough to pull me out of a dive or what have you. Now the next thing I'm going to do, because I have that all set up, I'm going to take my tail boom, and for an area that's about the width of my stabilizer, I'm going to sand it to rough it up. Now you'll notice on your elevator, and we're going to do this on the side so the elevator bends up. So on this side, I've got these two little notches in the wood right here. Those are my center line. Those mark where the tail boom is supposed to mount into this. So I'm going to take that part that I roughed up and use that as the mating surface. I'm going to glue my tail boom in. And we'll dip a little bit of accelerator on that because it is not wanting to harden fully. Okay, I'm going to lay this down flat. Now you'll notice on your vertical stabilizer, got a little notch, and that's just to line up with the bottom of the tail, sorry, not with the bottom of the tail boom, with the back of the, no, I had it right the first time. Sorry, it's kind of late at night. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put glue on here to bond with the tail boom and with the stabilizer across the part of it that I'm attached to. We'll try and get that nice and vertical. And there we go. And last thing is I'll go grab one of these control horns and pop one of those out. And I'll stick that in. Make sure everything looks good. It does. So now that goes in and it's attached. So last step, we want to mount this thing into our fuselage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this elevator, yeah right, I'm going to take this tail boom and I'm going to get an idea for where it goes in. I'm going to rough it up the same way I did on the back. And now lather this up with glue pretty good. Stick this in so that it comes part way through into the fuselage, and then make sure we're all level and straight, all that good stuff. And we've still got our plenty of positive incidents in the wing there. Now, all we have to do, that with some kicker, and there we go. It's straight, it's lined up, good to go. Alright, so at this point you can sit back and kind of admire your handiwork, because all we've got to do now is build a wing for it. So we'll pause and go to that next.